14th regular board meeting. Congratulations. Allow me to introduce the individuals at the table with me. From my right, we have Janelle Carter, Mike Miller. From my left, we have Karina Hernandez, Sean Heitman, and Ben Fletcher. At the center table with me to my right is Paulette Newbold. She is the board secretary. And to my left is Dr. Theron Schutte, the superintendent of schools, and I'm Bea Niblock. Welcome to all of you who are with us this evening, and welcome also to the individuals who will be watching us on delayed broadcast. We have a pink sheet here at the speakers table for anyone to sign up to address the board during the public comment section or during one of the agenda items. You'll be given 5 minutes to speak during public comments, and according to board policy, we are not allowed to respond to your comments, but we thank you for them anyway. Please read with me the mission of the Marshalltown Community School District. We develop learners who have the knowledge, skills, and positive mindset to successfully pursue
a meaningful future through personalized learning experiences.
And stand as you are able and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any additions or changes to the board agenda?
We did have one slight change with the proposed graduation list. There was a name added since the original list was posted, so we've got the revised list posted now.
Okay. May I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Miller, Hernandez, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. The motion carries 6-0. Mr. Potter?
Okay, we have Olivia Adams-Zamolak here. She is our Marshalltown High School Poetry Out Loud winner. She's preparing for the state competition in March, and only a sophomore, and she's won it twice at Marshalltown High School. So we're pretty excited to have her perform a couple of her poems here. She didn't write these poems, but she memorized them and recites them. So we welcome Olivia.
Hello.
Hi.
As Mr. Potter said, I am a sophomore. I was hoping to give you a quick, rundown of what Poetry Out Loud is and what we have to do for it. So Poetry Out Loud is a nationwide competition in which students recite poetry from an anthology in front of judges. And we are judged on 6 criteria, which are voice and articulation, dramatic appropriateness, evidence of understanding, overall performance, and physical presence. We also have a separate accuracy score. So it is not only memorizing and reciting the poems, it is also bringing them to life with gestures and inflections and so on. My grandfather likes to say it's not about getting through the poem, it's about getting the poem through you. As I will advance to the state competition, and I'm hoping to place in the top 3 and hopefully bring back some money for the school, for books and such. So my first poem is a pre-20th century poem. It's one of the criteria for the competition. It is called On Virtue. It's by Phyllis Wheatley. Phyllis Wheatley was an African slave brought over in the late 1700s, and she was a slave in Boston, and the people who kept her educated her, and she wrote poems. This particular poem addresses virtue, so her morals and her beliefs, and she addresses it not as an abstract construct, but as a person that she's talking to. So this is On Virtue by Phyllis Wheatley. O thou bright jewel in my aim, I strive to comprehend thee. Thine own words declare wisdom is higher than a fool can reach. I cease to wonder and no more attempt thine height to explore or fathom thy profound. But, O my soul, sink not into despair. Virtue is near thee, and with gentle hand would now embrace thee, hovers o'er thine head. Fain would the heaven-born soul with her converse, then seek, then court her for her promised bliss. Auspicious queen, thine heavenly pinions spread, and lead celestial chastity along. Lo, now her sacred retinue descends, arrayed in glory from the orbs above. Attend me, virtue, through my youthful years. O leave me not to the false joys of time, but guide my steps to endless life and bliss. Greatness or goodness, say what I shall call thee, to give an higher appellation still. Teach me a better strain, a nobler lay, O thou enthroned with cherubs in the realms of day. So, thank you. I have one more poem for you tonight. I recited both of these at the competition, by the way. I can't believe I forgot to say that. This poem is called The Poem You've Been Waiting For by Tavia Fasulo. In this poem, the meaning is somewhat unclear. I believe that a lot of it is up for interpretation, but the author addresses you in this poem, and it is unclear who you is. I particularly like this poem because the language is quite eloquent and very beautiful, so I'm very excited to recite this for you today. The Poem You've Been Waiting For by Tavia Fasulo. I saw then the white-eyed man leaning in to see if I was ready yet to go where he has been waiting to take me. I saw then the gnawing sounds my faith has been making, and I saw too that the shape it sings in is the color of cast iron mountains I drove so long to find. I forgot I had been looking for them, for the you I once knew, and the you that was born waiting for me to find you. I have been twisting and turning across these lifetimes where forgetting me is what you do, so you don't have to look at yourself. I saw that I would drown in a creek carved out of a field our incarnations forged, the first path through to those mountains. I invited you to stroll with me there, again, for the first time, to pause and sprawl in the grass while I read to you the poem you hadn't known you'd been waiting to hear. I read until you finally slept and all your jagged syntaxes softened into rest. You're always driving so far from me, towards the me I worry without you is eternity. I lay there, awake, keeping watch while you snored. I waited, as I always seem to, for you to wake up and come back to me. Thank you.
outstanding.
Thank you very much.
And we wish you the best of luck at the state
Thank you so
competition.
much.
And here's a little certificate
Oh,
of
thank you.
recognition for you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good luck. I now open the public hearing for the sale of surplus equipment. Is there anyone who would care to speak?
Hello. So we have three pallets, Gaylord boxes, and one pallet of used My Telephone equipment that was replaced with our voice over IP system this year. So we would like to leverage publicsurplus.com to sell that old retired equipment.
Questions? Is there anyone else wanting to speak to the board at this time? The public hearing for the sale of surplus equipment is closed. Moving on to the consent agenda. Looking at the minutes of December 17th, are there any additions or corrections from anyone? Any items of note on personnel, Mr. Spargettis?
Yes. All right, on the consent agenda tonight, there should be two people listed for early retirement, and I'll say just a few words about each of them. First is Linda Russell, and at the end of this school year, Linda will retire with 19 years of service as a special education teacher to our district. Prior to teaching in Marshalltown, Linda taught for 10 years at AGWSR. I do not know what all of those stand for. During her career with our district, she taught at Anson, Fisher, and where she's at now, Miller, and has taught all three levels of special education. Our other early retiree is Mike Loopy, and at the end of the school year, Mike will retire with 21 years of service as a teacher to Marshalltown High School. And prior to teaching in Marshalltown, Mike taught science for 8 years in Baxter. I should add, he teaches science here as well. Prior to teaching in Baxter, Mike was a substitute teacher for our district. In addition to teaching, Mike has served in various coaching roles in various sports. Most notably, he has served as head boys swim coach for 23 years, and that includes 2 state championship swimmers and 10 high school All-Americans. In total, he has been coaching swimming in this community for 29 years. He also served as the president of the Iowa High School Swim Coaches Association for 15 years and was a member of the State Swimming Advisory Board.
Thank you for your comments. Looking at the interagency agreements and contracts, are there any questions? Any questions on open enrollments? We have one out for the 1920 school year. Any items of note in bills? Any questions on the financial report? Please remember that a name has been added to the original early graduates list. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Carter Fletcher, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. The motion carries 6-0. Gonna give me the sheet. One of you hands back. Thank you, sir. Courtney. Please be sure and use a microphone.
Yeah.
All right. Hi, good evening. My name is Courtney Simons, and I'm an English teacher at MHS. I graduated from MHS in 2010, and this is my second year teaching here, but my fourth and a half overall. I started in Fort Dodge, but I always wanted to come home to teach in the community that I grew up loving. I've missed only one day so far this year, plus one class period when I left early to coach our students at an away volleyball game. I'm here almost every single day to do my job, and I think my students would say I do it with a positive attitude and enthusiasm. On Tuesday, January 8th, I received a letter in the mail notifying me that my IPERS had been underpaid last year, and to rectify it, the district corrected the deduction amount to my IPERS, but will now be taking $200 from my monthly paycheck. I will now be paying them back for their mistake. I thought it might be hard to imagine the impact a $200 loss has on a paycheck when it doesn't affect you directly, so I thought I should put a face and a story to how the sudden loss of $200 a month will impact me for the rest of 2019. My fiance and I are getting married in September, and I convinced him to get married here in the town that I love. We sat down and we discussed what we would each financially be able to save and contribute for our wedding, since we have to pay for half of it. We had that conversation based on checks I had been receiving for 4 months. Now we will have to have this conversation again, and we will have to figure out where to get an additional $1,400 that we were counting on me contributing. After our wedding, our goal was to aggressively tackle my loans by increasing my monthly payments. I already currently pay $750 a month toward my loans. Since this clerical error will affect me for the remainder of 2019, that's just a few more months I have to keep my payments the same and continue to accrue interest as high as 8%. I owe $41,000. I understand this is the district's decision, and I appreciate my IPERS is now in good standing. However, the insincerity of a letter telling me what was going to happen to my paycheck in a few weeks left a very sour taste in my mouth. It will take 2.5 years of teaching in this district before I see a paycheck that accurately reflects my experience and my lane change. 2.5 years. I can't afford to slack for even one day at my job because our kids are too important and they always deserve my best. Yet somewhere along the way, a lack of leadership has not given me their best. As a teacher, I take responsibility for the good and the bad that might happen in my classroom. I call and I email parents. I have conversations with kids. I check in with counselors, and I welcome conversation with administration. The letter I received continued the trend of holding only one person responsible, but how does that happen? I can't, and I wouldn't want to, do anything in my classroom that can't be checked by those above me. On Thursday night, I directed several questions to Paulette Newbold as instructed by the letter, but I'm awaiting a response. And I spend 40 hours a week caring for and looking out for kids' best interests, along with many nights and weekends. Getting this letter so suddenly in the mail has left me wondering who in this district is doing the same for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Wine.
Come on up, you guys. Tonight, we are going to showcase 2 new programs at the high school. Introduction to Education, if you could scroll to slide 13. And it's brand new in our, brand new at the high school for this year. It was featured in last year's course guide. And then we're also going to talk about Foods 3, which is a dual credit course as well, that was featured in our course guide last year and offered for the first time at the high school. And then I'll stick around and answer any other questions about the attendance center plan. But our highlight today is to focus a lot on not only earning dual credits, but becoming Bobcat ready and the work experience learning that kids will engage in as they go out into the community to practice the things that they've learned in the classroom. So tonight I have with me Samantha Snyder and Pablo, wrong way. Your hair is different today. Ariel Daniel and Pablo Sueves Montes. Did I say that right? I could be better, right? Jueves Montes. So I'm going to let them begin and talk and share their experiences and other things that they brought with them tonight about the coursework that they've been engaged in. Who wants to start?
I'll start.
Okay, be sure to talk into the microphone.
Yes. Hi, I'm Samantha Snyder. I'm a junior, and I take the Intro to Education class with the wonderful Mrs. Anderson. I really enjoyed this class because I've always wanted to be a teacher. I would like to say I had the best classroom in my basement when I was younger, but I always knew that I kind of wanted to be a teacher. Growing up, I kind of wondered what I wanted to do, but in the back of my mind, I knew I wanted to be a teacher. But I kind of pushed it off to the side, thought of some other things to do. But this class was something that really intrigued me, so I decided to take it, not knowing if I would like it, not knowing if I would decide not to be a teacher. But I have loved this class so much. I look forward to it every single day. And it has taught me a lot about myself and about going to school every day, or in this class, has made going to school every day a little bit different. You know, you see the good times with the teachers, you see them smiling with you, but you don't see what is after school. You don't see what they put in to these long lessons that they teach us. So I've really appreciated my teachers a lot more, knowing what they do behind the scenes. Personally, I didn't know what grade I wanted to teach, like I said, if I even wanted to be a teacher, but now it's become more clear that I want to teach family consumer science and go to Iowa State, go Cyclones. But yeah, I really enjoyed this class, and we've learned a lot about the history of teaching, what teaching takes, different learning styles, and it's been pretty cool learning about just how teaching has evolved over the years and how great we have it now. So yeah, I really liked this class a lot. So thank you.
Samantha, this semester, where what level are you going to be teaching at? Did you say you told me something about that?
Yeah, so next semester we're going to get some field work, which is really awesome, so we can kind of dip our feet into the water a little bit before having to make a big decision when we go to college. But next semester we will be assigned a classroom. We don't know that yet, but sooner than later we will find out. Tomorrow we get to go back to school, so we will hopefully find out soon. But I'm really excited to do that and learn more about the different grade levels and different things that I can experience throughout the different grades.
All right. Pablo?
Hello, my name is Pablo Cuevas Montes. I'm a senior at MHS, and my time, taking the course, Intro to Ed, has been awesome. Like my classmate Sam says, with Ms. Anderson, one of the best teachers. I agree with her as well. Starting in my freshman year at high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I kind of had an idea of becoming a teacher, but I wasn't 100% sure about it. It all started in my junior year when I was taking courses with Mrs. Anderson. For example, child development, a course from learning from the development from a fetus all the way to elementary age student, to child care practicum, which that's me up there in that course, going on field. It was actually a good time for me going to Woodbury, where it was my elementary school, and I was assigned with an ELL teacher, and we were just around the school. I was there for 2 hours, and it was a lovely experience helping kids and helping the teacher out with her students. And then this year, with the Intro to Education, it was the same thing, awesome. And about that class, well, my big takeaway from that class is just learning about that I do want to become a teacher, and that's something I really want to pursue. Something I really liked in the classroom was we watched a film. It was The Freedom Writers, and that film was like spoke to me in a way, you know, how there's teachers everywhere, and I kind of want to be that teacher that goes beyond from being that teacher, and being there for my students at all times, helping them whenever they need help, and yeah. Ms. Wine wanted me to talk about a program where I went this summer. It was actually UMet, the Summer Academy. I went. I think it was the second annual program. Last year was the first, and last year there was only one student, and this summer there was 6 students. I included myself, and it was really good time, and that made me want to be able to. That made me take the decision to become a teacher, and that's pretty much it for my part.
Pablo, can you tell the board a little bit more about what UMet stands for and what you did there?
UMet stands for just, it was a program that helped with students that participated in that program, helping them to see if teaching is the right career for them. Maybe it's not for everyone, but at least they know that it's not for them, and they had the, I'm trying to find the word, and they got the experience to understand if that's for them or not. Something we did over there is that we got assigned for a student in a summer school, and for me, I got assigned with a 3rd grader, and it was such a good time that I even have an activity that we did together. So we had this. We had to do a lesson, and my lesson was about how just follow your dreams and not give up on anything. He said he wanted to become a basketball player like Stephen Curry, NBA pro player, and I just told him not to give up. If that's what you want to do, you go for that. And we also did another activity with try to make our own comic, and he was so into Captain Underpants, and so we're like, we're gonna make a Captain Underpants comic. We're gonna make one ourselves, but we ran out of time. But it was such a good time, and I'll never forget that moment. And that'd pretty much be it.
And what level? Remind me again, what level did you want to become a teacher?
Oh, I'm trying to pursue my career in elementary education. So, yeah.
So you're into children's literature now?
Yeah, we could say.
I did ask Pablo to share about his experience at UMet because it is through the school district that the funding was made available to support our students who went to UNI for a week-long experience on campus. So that was a big thing right there, is the opportunity to be on campus, know what UNI is all about. And this is a program that supports minority students who want to go into education. So for us, we increased 600%, going from 1 student to 6. But we hope that we can continue to build upon that experience for our students here in Marshalltown, and we certainly want to thank the board for providing the financial support of that program. You ready? Okay, we're going to move to foods.
Woo. Okay. I'm Ariel Daniel, and I'm taking Foods 3. Oh, okay. Okay. I'm Ariel Daniel, and I'm taking Foods 3. I've taken Foods 1 and 2, and I was excited for Foods 3 because I've been waiting for it. And we've so far taken, the ServSafe certified test, and Nancy Large, Mrs. Large, came to our school for a week to teach us. And I'm ServSafe certified now. I took the test and I passed. And since Miss Hotop is taking more classes through the colleges and stuff to get her higher degree in foods, she had a chef come in and help teach us some of the things we need to know. And he's been really fun and everything. He comes in on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. And he was... gave us so many ingredients to choose from one time, and we got to pick either one we wanted to do and choose them and put them all together to make our own delicious meal or appetizer, whatever it was that day. And it was fun, and we also learned about the different things in restaurants, like napkin folding. We learned how to set the table, make it all look pretty. And then we also got to bake gingerbread cookies, homemade. We did homemade stuff. And then we learned...
Where was your gingerbread experience at?
Like at the school.
It was at the high school
Yeah.
or was that at ISU?
No, it was here.
That one was the foods too.
Oh.
Yeah.
At Iowa Central.
Yeah, they did it there. We did it at the school, and I may have burnt the first batch, but it's okay.
I was just going to ask you if your foods class wanted to cook for the board, but after that, that's okay. That's okay.
Maybe not gingerbread cookies, but we could cook something else up. Yeah, and then we also made homemade pasta too, which was really fun because, you never made homemade pasta. You always just get the box, pour it in, boil your water and everything. So it's kind of cool to taste like regular homemade pasta. And we learned like the history and background of it too. And then we also learned like the different positions in the chef side. There's an executive chef that does like little to no cooking, like they're mostly the managers. And then there's a sous chef that's like second in command, and they do like most of the watch over the kitchen area and like show around. So I thought that was cool to learn about the different positions that you can do in your career. And then overall, I learned so much and had the hands-on experience to create my own style or twist on food. Not only that, but we get a sneak peek of what the future offers us and helps us acknowledge where we belong. Furthermore, even if this wasn't the field of expertise you would like to go in, it gives you the knowledge and readiness for life in general, because everyone will need to be able to know how to cook a meal to eat. Knowing how the food you eat and cook for others is essential. And right now for our practicum, we're doing going to a job site, kind of like a job shadow, but they actually let you go hands-on into the kitchen area and stuff. So we're going to be knowing the different positions, like the cooking side, taking orders, or like cleaning and stuff like that. And I'm at Taco John's right now. And so I got my clothes and hat and everything set up. So we'll be starting Tuesday. And then Fridays we come back to learn like knife skills and getting cut stuff. So hopefully I don't cut my finger. And then I also have a job at Arby's, so I kind of know like a little bit into the cooking area. But like I also want to be in event management, and we got to go to Iowa State and DMAC to see like their culinary or food type of stuff. And I saw that they had event management at Iowa State. And so I thought that was pretty cool because you can like manage your own weddings or like other events that were really cool, but involve food like baking or like cooking anything for the gatherings or anything you wanted to do. So I thought that was really cool, getting to see the colleges and what you could do at college and the stuff they offer, which I'm probably going to Iowa State. Woo-hoo. I think that's it.
What's your major going to be?
Probably event management or like a mixture of culinary, so I'll have like both sides, I think.
Very good.
Yeah.
So, as you can tell from their experiences, they're pretty excited not only about their teachers, but about what's going on in school and how these things are connected to the experiences that they want post-secondary and leading them down the path. And as Samantha pointed out, maybe it's something I didn't want to do later in post-secondary, but at least I'm finding out about that now versus finding out about it when I'm a junior in college and then having to restart their programming. So, any questions from the board of our students?
Did the Safe Serve certification have any benefit in your current part-time work places?
It could, but like I'm not 18 yet, so I can't be counted as like an adult yet, so I'm not like that far into the management side or anything in Arby's, but like it helps, it looks really good if they see that, and that's what they told me, so.
Okay.
Yep.
Any other questions? Awesome.
It was nice to hear all those stories. Thanks.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to leave the students up here, and just real quick, we can go back through and update the attendance center plan at MHS and give you some highlights of where we're at as we ended the semester. And I tried to give the most accurate data. We just, grades were due today at 4 o'clock, so I wasn't able to add that to the report. But as you can see, we have 1,361 students at the high school, 64% free and reduced. and nice little mixture of various ethnicities among our students with all of the languages that they're learning. And you've heard from Dr. Stevenson about the Seal of Biliteracy and read Adam Saddam's report and the TR about the students and their excitement about being recognized now for their biliteracy in multiple languages, many of them in 3 or 4 languages. One of the biggest area, I was pretty happy about putting this together. Of course, I know that chronic absenteeism was a concern for the board when Dr. Stevenson presented that information from the state last year. It continues to be a challenge for us. We meet daily, weekly with families, with students, trying to uncover and use those collaborative problem-solving skills to uncover what prevents students from coming to school. I think if we dug in closer, we would see that sometimes, while we don't have an open campus policy, that students are skipping things like study hall regularly. Part of our policy and practice is that you have to have all your fines paid, and you can't have had any Fs in the previous semester to earn a dismiss like as a senior. And we don't have dismiss except for 7th period for juniors and younger. So students just take advantage of that and just walk off campus. So we have those punitive things like detentions and things like that with students, but I'm not sure that really deters them. And then the other challenge is making sure that they show up after school for that. Major referrals, we're doing really well here. If 80% of our students are more than 80% of our students are to have 0 or 1 referral, we are hitting it at 96%. So really nice job. What do we do there? I mean, we work our referrals just as much as we work attendance on a daily basis, working the hopper to pull students in and talk to them about their behaviors. One of the things that our team recognizes is that the more that we're out in the classrooms with the teachers, we tend to see a decrease in behaviors. That's a strategy that we try to and weekly remind each other to get out into those classrooms. The challenge being either we're in the classroom or we're working the attendance and doing all of those referrals behind the scenes. So it's a delicate balance, and sometimes an immediate need draws us out of the room before we can even get into the room. We've had 3 incidences, 3 students involved in bullying behavior so far this year. Again, we continue to work with students on conflict is usually where that comes from. We examine it real closely to see if it's a back and forth thing or if there's some power that's been removed. So we've identified 3 incidences where bullying did occur. Reading math, student achievement. I indicated there the number of students who received at least 1 intervention in reading, and with 1,500 total being assigned, as well as the math interventions. Again, I could give you grades to support how well those interventions provided. I just pulled that report literally while I was sitting in the chairs and started looking at the data just briefly. So I really can't say how much it's impacting. But our teachers we do lesson studies with our staff to raise the rigor of their lessons and increase the student engagement. Because when you flip to that next slide on IPI data, we've actually increased our, if you remember from the chat with Dr. Valentine, our 5 and 6 levels in IPI student engagement, that is, they're directly engaged in their work, to 26.4%. Our goal, obviously, is to get to that higher ratio of 33%. So those are things that we work on, and we do that again through that lesson study with the teachers. How are you raising the rigor in your classroom, and how are you engaging students beyond just a recall, but at a higher level of engagement and application in their learning. So those have been great conversations, and I know that on your calendar there was an invite to join us for PLCs at the end of January. I'd be excited to have you drop in whenever you're available, and to see our teachers in action as they have the conversations about their lesson plans and how they're providing interventions for students or using data to provide interventions for students. Graduation rate, as you know, this past year we came just slightly under 88%. We're still shooting for the goal of 90%. What have we done to make sure we get there, or that students are aware how they're progressing? We do transcript analysis, and it doesn't matter if you're a freshman or a senior. We've definitely done that with the sophomores through senior. Our freshmen will get their first item in our transcript analysis after this first semester, because many of them didn't have a transcript until now. So they'll get a chance to look at how they're progressing towards that first 5.5 credits that they need to get as a freshman. We currently have 77 students participating in credit recovery after school, and through the help of Mr. Kozak, we provide a bus on Tuesdays to get kids back around, so we're trying to overcome that transportation gap. And then we have 46 students in our peer program as they do some more credit recovery and work to reach in that graduation date of June 2nd, as they have been behind on credits in the past. And finally, we monitor weekly the number of students that we're dropping. We are currently at 42 of our 75. We just hit that mid-year, and we'll continue to watch that, trying to make sure that we don't go more than 75, but we've done a really nice job over the past couple of years of decreasing the number of students we drop out. So pretty happy about that, pretty happy about our school proficiency profile that Dr. Stevenson shared with you about for all of our schools. There's obviously some areas where we can improve, and we will continue to do that. But our work with Bobcat Ready and College and Career Readiness, I think, helps us to be purposeful in how we engage students in their post-secondary planning.
Questions?
Yeah, so is that an after-school program that is a peer?
Peer, no, that's during school day.
Oh.
Yeah.
Which one is the one that you said had transportation?
Oh, the after-school, it's called 8th Hour.
Oh.
8th Hour, it's a purely credit recovery. And so the students actually meet with their teachers in the same location as the peer, which is on our lowest level. And then the bus comes right out there on Bobcat Boulevard, and they can walk out and hop on the bus if they need to. It's wonderful.
No, sorry.
Any other questions?
That you were waiting for. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, guys.
Our lone student rep, please join us.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Okay, so this past week we had semester tests on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. During this, we had block scheduling, so there were only 3 periods a day, and they were 90-minute class periods rather than the usual 45. We also had open campus lunch, so students had an hour to go out to eat, and I think everyone really enjoyed that freedom. So something exciting in the classroom, since I have seen you last, is the physics class built projectile launchers as a final project. So we tested the launchers for accuracy and precision before break, and then after break, a write-up was due that explained what went wrong, what went well, and why we built our projectile launchers the way we did. So here's a couple of videos that show some of the launchers. So this one's like a catapult. And then there's another launcher. And this helped us better understand two-dimensional motion and what different angles and velocities were needed to hit the targets. This past Friday, Emily Miller and I went to the Know Your Constitution luncheon in Des Moines, and we were selected for this based on a 50-question multiple-choice exam and an essay about a law that violated the Constitution. There were 100 students throughout the state recognized at this luncheon, and Susan Christensen, the newest Iowa Supreme Court Justice, was the keynote speaker at the event, and she spoke about the Sixth Amendment. Before break, Mrs. Chandler's composition classrooms delivered treats to the Roundhouse workers, and I was in her class when we did this. And there was great participation. There were more than 30 students who delivered the treats, and there were different cookies, brownies, cupcakes, a lot of different things for all the workers, and it was nice for us to show our appreciation for all they do. Some upcoming events. This Thursday at 5:30, there's a home boys swim meet versus Waukee. And then something new and exciting is the winter semi-formal, which is a Sadie Hawkins dance. So the girls are going to ask the boys. And this is the first Sadie Hawkins dance since I've been at the high school. So I know everyone's looking forward to that. And that's February 2nd in the cafeteria. Any questions?
Why is it called Sadie Hawkins?
I don't know why it's called that. That's just what like the name is. It's like they call Sadie Hawkins or like the dances where girls ask boys. I don't know where the name came from though. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Looks like it was based on a comic strip.
Oh, did you look at
I Googled it. Just got there.
Mr. Goslinga, Mrs. Wyatt? We could have just let you sit and wait, and watch you do that.
All right. You want me to start? Well, as our executive summary points out, in the 2018 legislative session, a new graduation requirement was placed on all of our students, beginning with the class of 2020. So these are junior students who have already had their four-year plan laid out for them, and then they get this additional course added to them. Well, and while many students will be okay with that, there are a few who will be entering our peer program in the fall because they're already behind, and this is kind of putting a crunch on some students in terms of requirements. So we are here today to seek approval for a new course offered in Marshalltown Community Schools because we have juniors who are wanting to get started now. And with a requirement that they have to have work-based experience next year to get dismissed, whether it's community service, individual jobs that they have, or internships that we provide for them, there will be plenty of students who will seek that coveted dismiss as a senior through one of those three ways. And so they do not want to be on campus another period in any way whatsoever. So Mr. Goslinga, if you would like to talk about the online course that you've developed.
So one of the ways we're working to try to meet this requirement in a way that's resource neutral to the district is, and to accommodate kids with a variety of different schedules, because this requirement is coming up on students with basically some kids only 3 semesters or 2 semesters of high school left, is we've developed an online and blended option for students so they can access the course online and complete the course in an online format and would not have to necessarily block a period of their day in order to access the course. And staff from the MLA campus will be facilitating that online course.
This is a really unique request, and one that's been driven by decisions made in Des Moines that are kind of holding our feet to the fire on how to solve this in an urban or larger school system. I know that ever since the initial guidance came out in August, I've been working with my colleagues at the UEN in Des Moines and at our monthly AEA and state meetings, trying to figure out how everyone's going to tackle this, because it's as much of a challenge for your small one-section rural schools as it is for your gigantic Des Moines schools, and we are right in it with all of them, having lots of challenges. So we're very excited that this fall we've been able to collaborate. And Eric has a teacher or two that's been very helpful in modifying the financial literacy course we had in place for MLA students. And I'm sure Dr. Schutte will chime in too here, but it's been a frustrating experience for us. So we're hopeful that the online format that we've created that encompasses every bulleted standard and topic that must be covered in this course is able to meet the Department of Ed standards. Right now, we're having a phone call tomorrow, I believe, right, after many emails and conversations with our colleagues at the Department of Ed about how to make sure this is exactly what kids need. And yet it is done in a resource-neutral way because we don't have extra staff who aren't already teaching American history, government, et cetera, to all the rest of our students.
Questions?
So this would be implemented this upcoming semester?
It'll be phased in second semester for some students who are ready, and then every one of our juniors that doesn't take it this semester will be required to do it next fall or their spring of their senior year.
And is this course the long-term plan, or are we still working on a
No, the
regular
long-term
class?
Right, that's the short-term plan for, and you can kind of see with the graphic, but to get us through this year's juniors, and then for the incoming ninth graders and 10th and 11th, correct? Or 10th, I'm sorry. We'll be doing it in more of a blended format with more face-to-face teacher contact blended in with the online content. So it'll be a semester course that students would register versus right now they have a chance to take 2 electives in social studies in addition to their required electives. So this is limiting their elective selection moving forward for 9th, 10th, the incoming 9th, 10th graders.
I think it's important to note there are face-to-face sections that are going to be offered. So students would not have to choose an online course unless they wanted to take an online course. So it's going to be offered in a couple of different formats. And in both ways, the courses are identical. It's just the methodology in which they're delivered is the difference there.
And I think ideally, it would be really nice for every student, especially if they're going on for post-secondary instruction, to have at least one online experience before they leave high school. This is, I think, a quality way for some to experience that. And it's just been really unfortunate, as was shared, that we've run into a few stumbling blocks it's not really with the Department of Ed, but it is in that it's all rooted in the legislation that was passed, whether particularly regarding Iowa Learning Online. And kind of getting on my political soapbox, I remember 9 years ago when many of the current administration were elected about no unfunded mandates. And this is an example of an unfunded mandate or an underfunded mandate, however you want to look at it. So we're trying to be fiscally responsible and figuring out with the least amount of disruption in a disruptive situation where juniors to be seniors are being required to get an additional half graduation credit. They weren't anticipating. How can we, in a resource neutral way, whether it be human resources or whether it be financial resources, get this done. And as the law was written for Iowa Learning Online, if the DE through Iowa Learning Online offers a course and school districts are not supposedly permitted to offer their own of the same. But the other concerning thing is that, number one, until about 2 months ago or a month ago, Iowa Learning Online didn't have this class. So in order for us to have the class, we had to start working on it back in September, October. The other thing is that the future is uncertain about Iowa Learning Online. I've heard from Director Weiss himself on 2 occasions that if the legislature doesn't allocate at least $500,000 for Iowa Learning Online, that it may not be in existence next fall. So even if we were to subscribe to that at $280 per student for those that would want to do it, there's no guarantee it's even going to be in place next year. So Eric and I actually had a very good conversation with Amy Williamson from the DE today, and it appears that they're very interested in working with Marshalltown to figure out at least a temporary solution for our sophomores through or sophomores and juniors for sure, or freshmen through juniors, while we implement the long-term plan of implementing it through the social studies primarily.
May I have a motion to approve the Iowa Financial Literacy course required for graduation as presented?
So moved.
Second. Carter Hernandez. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries 6-0. Please join us.
Jackie, are you on the Leaders of Learning also? Book Talk, Dave?
Raleigh is.
Oh, Dave and Raleigh.
Kyle. Second row, pull a chair up to the table.
Please save me a microphone. Save me a microphone.
Get it. Well, Chapter 7, similar to Chapter 6, kind of gets into the weeds a little bit of education as it relates to particularly instructional practice and assessments, but it also speaks very directly to the direction that we're trying to move relative to the PLC work that's been implemented for a year to 2 years, depending on where the school is at, and things that stuck out to anybody from this chapter. There are only 3 guiding questions, so.
I have a question for the administrative team, if, you knew it, didn't you?
I figured it was
Yeah,
coming,
yeah. As this chapter goes through setting up the scoring grids for rubrics and so on, those of you who evaluate teachers using that format, how does that impact what it is that you do as an administrator?
As far as looking at lessons?
Yeah.
I mean, it helps you know that there's definitely planning that goes involved. I mean, seeing that and having teachers have that prepared, they've done that collaboratively with their team. I mean,
And what do you do if you find teachers who are not following that plan? How's that?
I think it's pretty easy to, I mean, I'm just speaking, not for everybody here, but it's easy to ask, well, what do we want students to do? If they don't know what they want students to do, that's a pretty,
Right.
that's a pretty big sign. But if they don't know, if I'm asking, what does proficient look like? What does basic look like? If I can't see that there's a distinction on how I prepare a lesson to teach to, those foundational levels, the proficient level, and then asking the question of, what do we do to take this beyond?
Yeah.
So I think what Kyle's really, what he's talking about is that second question. When you think about 4 big guiding questions of the PLC, which is, how do we know that they know it?
Mm-hmm.
First part, yeah, everybody, I mean, it's fairly rare to find a teacher who can't tell you what they want kids to know.
Yeah.
But as far as what is an acceptable level of evidence when you start thinking about all of these different proficiency ranges, I think that's where the meat of that PLC work really starts to happen.
And that comes through a lot in knowing what kids don't know in the next chapter with MTS and RTI and all of the things that it was called and is called and et cetera. But if you have a plan that's come from a PLC, and assuming that you're sitting in on some of those, if you sit in on one where the lesson is developed and you observe a teacher teaching that lesson, how does that gauge what it is that you look for and what it is that you see or don't see.
I think it's,
Strategies.
so understanding, I mean, if you're, what you're talking about, I think, is,
More
you know,
implementation of the plan,
we're so much better informed as being a part of that PLC process and participating in that PLC with that group, that I have a much clearer picture about what that group talked about in their PLC meetings and those sessions that they're talking about, and then what we get to see in a classroom. That if you see something that's veering or that's drastically different from that, that gives an opportunity to talk about, okay, so share with me why I didn't see what we had talked about here. You know, what decisions, what happened to lead you to making some of those decisions that led you down a different pathway. And it really just kind of opens up that idea of, I mean, is that just a random anomaly, or was there some formative assessment information that came in when she was working with, or he were working with students that led to some different decisions? So I think you're just more informed and you have a better idea of really what is that acceptable, again, that acceptable level of evidence for all those stages.
Provide you an opportunity for coaching.
Yeah, let's have a little
Absolutely.
conversation
Absolutely.
about, here's our desired state, what's our current
Right.
reality?
Right.
There's our current reality, and now, if there's a gap there, how do we get to that, the implementation level that we'd want, based on the discussion you'd have with your team, or, how you design that plan, if it's not executed, the way that it's intended, or the rest of your team isn't executing it, then you're able to identify that gap and start to have those conversations on how to close it too.
And it certainly leads back to, when you think of that first guiding question from tonight's chapter, it's like student learning.
Yeah. Period.
Are students learning what we intended them to learn? And if they're veering away from what that PLC discussed in terms of, what are my examples, what are my non-examples, how am I going to provide some scaffolding for those who are ready, how am I going to, chunk things together for those who already have some basic understanding and to get that informational or introductory level. So if the students aren't learning, I mean, really, that's the key. So then you're going to stop and have a conversation about, okay, so why did we veer away from this if we don't have any evidence that we were ready to do that?
Thank you.
But by the same token, Marzano does mention in there that you may have teachers, kids are learning, okay? They may just have that natural ability to motivate, relate. They've got the hook to get the kids involved. But then you ask them, what is it that you're doing, that kids are successful? And they say, I don't know. Well, that's where the PLC and the groups come around. Somebody may have the verbiage as to scaffolding or chunking or whatever that they can tell them, well, this is what you're doing. Oh, okay, well, I don't, I just teach.
Yeah, I just get it, I'm doing it, yeah.
Good to know.
And I think he does a good job of addressing that in this, the one section of that. And I think that's fair. For some teachers who are really into teaching, but they may not have, all the, when he talked about the whole deal with, the First Amendment and breaking down the First Amendment, as an old government teacher, okay, yeah, some kids, you got to do that. You have to still present the whole thing and then break it down. Some kids are going to be able to come back to the whole concept of the Constitution a lot quicker than others. And so, I guess I appreciated how he, the social studies background, he used that as an example so I could relate it a lot quicker, to what he was talking about.
I think it was, what you're talking to me, what I'm hearing is that you're really pumping up the benefit of those instructional rounds too.
Yeah.
I might not know what exactly I'm doing, but having my team come into my classroom, they might be able to identify that and help, spread that good teaching around too. It's good.
So is PLC the science of teaching, and does it take away from the art of teaching?
I think the framework to really focus the.
It's both.
You want to answer that?
I think the book spoke to that in that, I mean, there is obviously a lot of science and teaching, much more today than there was probably when I started teaching, but the beauty of it is that it's not so prescribed that teachers don't have the autonomy to deviate if they see reason to need to deviate from the plan if they're not getting the results.
I think they talk about that in this chapter, don't they?
Yeah.
A little bit, and I think the fun part, actually, when you're in a PLC, when you get down to that question, and you've got an agreed-upon set of outcomes, an agreed-upon strategies or lesson formats, and then they come back and they're comparing student data after an assessment, and they look at it and say, well, wow, man, Raleigh's kids did way better than mine. And so we start talking about it, and I said, well, what did you teach? And he said, I taught this. And well, that's what I taught. And really get down to that question of, well, what were the words that were coming out of your mouth? Because clearly, whatever you were saying or how you were saying it had a bigger impact than what I said or how I said it. And so that's really where some of the fun conversations of a PLC are. Like, those lie in those kinds of conversations.
And that's the tricky part. As you're forming those teams, that's where it gets...
Takes a level of trust.
That's where you got to develop that trust level, because, you know, it's all good when you're coming up with those common assessments and giving those common assessments, but once you get those results back and you go, all right, my kids did this, and your kids did this, and your kids are either off the charts or way down here, that's when those fun conversations, not really fun, but I mean, those were those trusting conversations start, because your next step is going, all right, how do we get all our kids, how do we get all our classrooms performing at the level of our best classrooms?
And when you have a PLC that really takes that collective responsibility for the learning of all kids,
Trust is there.
then you eliminate that, well, you know, that's just because they were with me.
Yeah.
Approach of some teachers. Of course, my kids always perform better than everybody else's. But it's not really that level of, I don't even want to call it competition or whatever, goes away, because now it's, you know, they take this collective responsibility to get every kid to, every student to that high level. And then it becomes more of everybody's charge.
Other questions?
Doing good.
There's been a lot of technical education language and concepts within the past two chapters, so I think it'll probably be even a little bit easier to grasp as we start to talk about the what do you do when they're not learning and that sort of thing. So, but it just shows you how complex the art of teaching has become when you're truly trying to meet the needs of all students, both with the planning for differentiation as well as the assessment.
So is that the art or the science?
I'm sorry, the science, yeah. And the art is more based on the science in terms of figuring out when and what to do as far as the instructional strategies. And I think one of the main points that I pulled out of there is no magic bullet. There's no one strategy that's going to work for all kids. And that's why we continue to say we got to give teachers as many tools in their toolbox as we can so that they can make those adjustments when deemed necessary for a student or all students.
I kind of figured Raleigh would want to talk all psychomotor and how to hit a baseball and all that type of stuff.
At varying speeds.
Don't
Yes.
bring back that kinesiology class. Yeah.
Any other comments or questions for the team? Looking at, to make some of the weeds easier to travel through, looking at the next chapter. Chapter 8 is one on the RTI, it refers to it as RTI. And that's no longer a terminology that we use. Would you like to explain the difference between RTI and MTSS and the similarities, the whatever, so that whenever you see RTI reading in the next chapter, you need to think of the multi-tiered system of supports that each of the principals have talked about in their presentations. Because they're really doing Chapter 8, responding when kids don't know and didn't learn, and the interventions, but it's, just has different terminology now. So would you be so kind as to do that, Mr. Gretzinger?
I'll try to. Marshalltown and the state of Iowa switched over our focus to a multi-tiered system of support from response intervention. They're very similar in most regards and aspects, but the biggest difference is when you were learning about response intervention, it focused so heavily on intervention for all kids that it was leaving out the foundational aspect of we have to do good teaching to start with. So we have to have a really solid core instructional set, and we have to be able to provide really good information about how kids are getting the information they need and how are kids responding to learning in the classroom. It was also heavily on the intervention part where it forgot about the kids who already knew it. So what do we do when you have those accelerated learners, those gifted learners, and they don't need intervention like most people think in a deficit model? They need you to extend the lesson. They need you to deepen the lesson. So under the acronym of MTSS, it emphasizes those pieces that were left out in RTI.
And you'll help us understand that in the next chapter.
I'll try.
Won't you? Yes, you will. Anybody else, anything to add?
Just one thing is that when RTI, we were heavy in the No Child Left Behind world and the SINA days. And people were really talking about math and reading only. And when Iowa started focusing on MTSS, it was a kind of a breath of fresh air, and along came ESSA at the same time. Because it really is a framework that lets you think about how does our system support kids in anything. Maybe it's in art class, maybe it's in physical education, maybe it's in science. So we want every teacher to be thinking about what is the multi-tiered system of supports for their content area. So how am I going to respond when kids are gifted? How am I going to help ensure that every child is growing? Because our ESSA school performance profiles, in some cases are up to 50% weighted on growth. And so we're looking for every child to grow in our system of supports, no matter where they are. If they're at the 40th percentile, we want them to get to the 50th. If they're at the 80th, the 90th, et cetera. So I think that's kind of a more whole child look with MTSS than RTI had more of a negative deficit connotation to it.
Questions, comments? Thank you all.
Thank you.
Moving on to policies. Looks like you're up.
Yeah, with the policies that are here for the first reading, we have not made any changes to these since the last meeting. We had two policies that were new to be adopted from ISB that are mandatory policies, 605.4, technology and instructional materials, and 606.6, insufficient classroom space. And then we also have three policies which existing policies, which we amended with some IASB language that was lacking in ours. 605.9 on physical education, 700 purpose of non-instructional and business services, which Paulette reviewed as well as Janelle. And then the new former 904.1, new 504.4 on student performances. So I would recommend those be approved this evening and waive the second reading.
Could I have
Sorry, just real quick. The insufficient classroom space one, I think I asked you about this in December, and I think you explained it to me. It still isn't, the last paragraph of it is, this policy is reviewed by the board annually. What is it we're reviewing annually? Just the existence of the policy, or?
Well, I mean, I think the intent is just to make sure that that the district maintains or sustains reasonable classroom sizes.
So it's just, we just need to ask ourselves the question annually?
It's just a requirement of the law.
Okay.
And, there's some districts that really get prescriptive about this. I think a lot of times it happens when, districts are going through budget difficulties, and as a result are maybe having unusually high classroom sizes, or it might help provide guidance in a district that's growing quite a bit, quite quickly, and, they want to make sure that there's reasonable limits or maximums.
So we could foreseeable, or a district could customize this to say, this is the maximum allowed.
Yes.
These types of facilities and these types of classes. If we go over them, we need to adjust to it.
There are many districts who do that.
Yeah, you could have a regulation that specifies, maximum desired class sizes and that sort of thing. We try to do our best to try to keep class sizes balanced as best we can throughout the district, while also recognizing the importance of kids needing to, or desiring in their parents to attend their neighborhood school when possible. That's blurred a little bit, of course, for us with the central district and the rural district and what winds up happening there. But for the most part, I think right now, like, for example, we're hovering around that 20, 21, 22 average in most of our lower elementary classrooms, and I think the unwritten mark is around 25 as far as the maximum. When you get up into the secondary levels, it's probably closer to that 25 to 30 range, with 30 being the desired maximum. Not that that hasn't, in a singleton course at the high school or two, gone over that by a student, not probably in the recent past, but, it's a little bit more complex scheduling there with the different courses that they have, and so they try to work very hard to restructure those schedules to, again, provide as much equity across the classes, whether they be core classes or non-core classes there too. But generally speaking, I think, and B can speak to it from a historical perspective, it's pretty much been 25 max at the elementary desired and about 30 at the secondary levels, although they're probably more close to the 25, 27 than they are the 30 in most cases, not all.
Well, and then you have preschool that has a legal limit, and you have special education classes that have a legal limit, so we could put a Marshalltown legal limit on the number of kids in a class.
No, I'm not trying to suggest a change, I just wanted to understand
Yeah.
the policy.
Okay, could I have a motion to adopt new policies 6054 and 6066 and waive the second reading?
So moved.
Second.
Carter Fletcher, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0. Now could I have a motion to amend 6036, 700, and 5044 and waive the second reading?
So moved.
Second.
Carter Fletcher, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries 6-0. And now we are on to the 605-4R, which is
Yeah.
505.5.
So 605.4R, which will be changing to 505.5, is on graduation requirements. We originally were bringing this back for an initial review because we made some adjustments based on a little bit on what you heard today with what the future holds with that financial literacy credit and what the longer-term impact's going to be to world history in order to compensate for that. So Mrs. Wyatt thoroughly reviewed this in order to make sure that we had it as accurately as what current practice and future proposed practice is. So we would plan on bringing that back before you for first reading at the next meeting.
Okay.
The transfer of funds, which Karina and Paulette reviewed. We haven't made any changes since you saw it at the last meeting, so we would suggest that that be marked as reviewed.
701.2.
Yes.
Okay. What about 704.2, a new policy? Or are you getting to that?
Yeah, 704.2, Paulette reviewed that. That's a new policy for us. It's one that we just simply haven't had and feel like we need that. 701.5, also Karina and Paulette reviewed this. We are proposing that we delete the old policy of 701.5, replace it with a new policy number, 704.2R1, post-issuance compliance regulation for tax-exempt obligations. Paulette, anything you want to share on that, or?
Is it just the number that changed?
I think there was difference in language, was there not?
Okay.
The remaining three policies, 703.1, budget planning, 703.3, preparation of the working budget document, and 703.3R, financial planning calendar. The first two we're recommending mark as reviewed. They mirror the IASB language. 703.3R, Paulette has made some adjustments in the financial planning calendar based on current or best practice, I believe, so that would come back.
So out of those, we're bringing back 701.5 and 703.3R.
Correct.
Okay. And the others are marked as reviewed. Any questions from board members on those coming back? Nope. Okay. Mr. Potter, anything of note in communications? And we're all loving what's happening in the legislature. Next meeting of the school board is the 4th of February, and Franklin will be making its school report. We have a board work session from 4 to 6 on January 28th, and that's enrollment, right?
Yes.
Policies up for review. Oh, gosh, Ben, you only have 4.
All right. I'll get on those.
Would either Janelle or Mike like to give us any information from the facilities meeting?
Sure. We reviewed the planning process that's been done by TSB at this meeting, and actually was very pleased with it. They had, we had it on maybe 2 sheets of paper.
Wow.
It was pretty good. And it was broken out into facilities implementation, capital projects, and maintenance. A lot of prioritizing had been done. However, there's still some work for the board to be done because of the big projects out there. We discussed a lot of financing from PEPL and SAVE and what's the other one? Pearl funds. We don't have a lot of working capital, and we're still in kind of a wait and see mode for the SAVE extension. So we talked about that a lot. Anything else you guys can think of that we talked about? Still a work in progress, but I was pretty happy to see that we had gotten as far as they have, so.
I think it's getting close to being able to come before the full board to take a look at what are the top priorities, the highs, the mediums, the lows, and in what year those would be planned, and a plan for funding those to give to the whole board to make sure that they agree with the prioritization that both us and administration has worked on so far. So it's good. It's good. It's taken a long time to get here, but it's good.
The prioritization is, from a board standpoint, is really the higher level prioritization. Like, are we going to push for working with the community on redoing Miller, for example? Or are we, what are our priorities there? In terms of the district operations, obviously, they need to know that so that they can schedule the appropriate maintenance, scheduling, and those sort of things. I don't think we're really going to be prioritizing those sort of things, so. It became a lot clearer, I thought. So it was good.
Thank you. What have we done this evening to improve education for students in the district? We have a new course at the high school.
Yeah.
Facilitate graduation of a class. Or three.
Indeed. Mhm.
And relative to that new course, and I apologize, I had to step out for a minute, but hopefully in what was presented, people understand that we're 100% behind the need to integrate financial literacy into the curriculum. It just is very complicated when there's no funding to help support it or minimal guidance to support it. And the thing that's most problematic, I think the two things that are most problematic with the current law as it was written in the 12th hour at the end of the legislative session is the quick implementation. Usually things like that would start with an incoming freshman class. So you have 4 years in order to help kids and staff get through it. The second is that as the law is written right now, students who may have taken a financial literacy course, for example, are business elective in financial literacy, or a course at MLA, that was a blended learning format. If the way the law is currently written, if it did not address all the topics that were specified in the legislation, currently you can't grandfather those kids. They'll have to retake or take another. So these are things that I've been calling Representative Smith and Senator Edler, and I called the new member of the Education Committee, who I know out in eastern Iowa, can't think of her name, Chris Cornoyer, I think, from Bettendorf, and met over at the library the other day with Abby Finknauer, who's a newly elected federal person, but it was mainly in hopes that the new education chair from Waterloo was going to be there, and unfortunately wasn't. But we're working very hard on our own behalf, as well as the rest of the state, to hopefully have the state figure something out that can provide some flexibility in how this gets implemented, because I don't believe, not only do not all students and or their parents understand this most recent legislation, but I think there's still a lot of school districts that aren't fully aware of the urgency for which this needs to be accomplished. So,
Any items for future agendas?
B, could I request a couple things? One, I would request that maybe Paulette and Anthony give us a white paper, give us an explanation, and I don't think waiting 2 weeks is quick enough for this. So that's why I asked for maybe a white paper to explain the whole thing that the teacher, this Courtney Simmons, came to talk to us about tonight. Maybe you can give us an explanation as to what the veracity of all this is and explain it, number one. And number two, oftentimes and I don't blame you for this, but what you always say this when it comes to public comment. It says, board policy doesn't permit us to make comment, but we thank you for them anyway. That's always the line that you use. And I have, ever since I've been on the board, I understand why you say that. I think that board policy, though I've never seen that board policy, I assume it exists, I've never seen it, but I guess I'd like to review, my request would be, could we review that board policy? I think it'd be good to have a debate on both sides of this issue, whether or not it is valuable to the person that is presenting to us to be able to make comment directly at the time that they're presenting. I think I can see why the board policy is there. I think it's worth debating and think we should study it. So that would be my request.
I think the way that the meeting is structured is that, if a person were wanting to have that dialogue, then they would request the item be a separate agenda item, so that there could be some dialogue and so that people would be prepared to have that dialogue.
More to do with open meeting.
Which was part of what B shares as well.
Like I say, let's take a look at the policy and let's debate it.
I was going to say that we did have a finance presentation this week as well, back on committee reports. But out of that, we have a board work session coming up on February 2nd to review, and it's just a continuation of the Mark J. Becker and Associates. So I think you've all seen that, but I just wanted to put that reminder out there.
February 2nd?
Oh, 6th, I'm sorry, February 6th.
It's a Wednesday.
2/6, yeah. 2/6, I have written down here. It is, I think, a Wednesday.
Well, and I'd like to invite, if there are any board members that, like over the noon hour, either Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, would like to do a quick tour of the Roundhouse construction, I'd be more than happy to accommodate that. I know Janelle's been.
Yeah, at the facilities meeting last week, I did do the tour. We're getting close on finishing the Roundhouse. It still looks like a construction site, but.
The gym floor is down, and so they're really working hard this week to get everything else done that needs to be hung, whether it's hoops or scoreboards and such, because once they seal that floor, stain and seal it, which is projected to be early next week, I believe, then you won't be able to walk out on that for about 2 weeks. So if for some reason the noon hour doesn't work, I'm more than happy to work with your schedules to try to figure out when that can be done if you desire to do that.
Can I say thank you too to the board members that came this morning to our professional development keynote? I shared with our presenter at the end that there were board members in attendance, mostly because I knew Karina because she came up on stage. And he said, wow, that's impressive. And I think it just kind of, sometimes we take it for granted, but we do appreciate the board members taking time to come on site and see what we're doing with, when we have our sleeves rolled up kind of time. So thank you for being there. Those of you that could make it with your schedule.
Mike and I were sitting in the back.
Thanks for coming, Mike, and you too. Even though you didn't come up on that.
And Karina was volunteer.
Karina was volunteer.
Yeah. She thought there was money in it.
I did. For food.
You were still in the 70%.
Well, my quote tonight comes from Dr. Gorski, in fact. He says, "No student should be denied the educational opportunities offered her peers because of where she was born, or the economic condition of her family, or for that matter, her family's home language or racial identity, or any other condition beyond her control." Do we have our per student here? Would we like a break before we go into closed session? Okay, we're going to take a break until 1:45.